You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. So the Isaias saga is continuing to drag on. However, some potentially good news for the coast of Florida as the storm looks to be turning towards the north, currently moving north-northwest as of the latest National Hurricane Center advisory. The 11 a.m. has just come out. 65-mile-an-hour winds and a pressure of 995. And I'll show you the radar a little bit later and you'll see just how the storm's moving, and it looks to me as though it's made its closest approach to the coast of Florida already at this point, at about 50 miles offshore. My name's Nathan Foy. I'm joined by our team in this hour of discussion and update on this tropical storm. Tropical storm warnings have been issued elsewhere though, for parts of south into North Carolina, so we now have tropical storm warning from Jupiter Inlet all the way up to I think it was Surf City, North Carolina. You'll see it confirmation on that on your screen a little bit later on. But a big extension to the tropical storm warning zone. No hurricane warnings anymore. No areas expecting hurricane conditions. So the hurricane threat would appear to be over, but still a rain threat and potentially still a surge threat from this storm in the Carolinas, but the storm surge watch has just been discontinued for the coast of Florida as well. So a big reshuffle in the warnings, but still the same threats remain, just for a different location now and a little bit further out. For latest reaction to that, let's take a listen to our team and let's go over to Strat. What's going on today?
Bit east of what some people were expecting prior, even though there is deep convection bubbling up that are bringing some tropical storm conditions just offshore. For now at least, much of Florida is escaping this on the sparing side in terms of impact, so that's really great to see. Although notably, there still are tropical storm warnings across almost the whole Florida coastline.
There is indeed. You can see most of the deep convection is still staying off the coast of Florida, but still tropical storm conditions could be occurring along there. This is the latest radar imagery as well, and you can see quite clearly or it would appear to be quite clear, the actual track of the storm through the radar imagery there. You're watching the center of it, which is somewhere around here, moving up towards the north, as you can see further on, and then eventually you follow that track up and it will end up curving out somewhere in towards that direction, we think, over the next 24 hours. So it would appear, well, the radar has just disappeared, but we had it somewhere around there, that the storm track is taking it further and further away from Florida as the time goes on, if that north-northwest movement continues.
Yeah. Again, just overall a really positive trend to see develop with this, at least in terms of potential impacts to the Florida coastline. But it does mean that we are still watching up further up the coast now in the Carolinas, where tropical storm warnings were extended through significant portions of North Carolina now.
Yeah, shall we read off those warnings?
Yeah.
I'll read it out.
Have you got them?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
A storm surge watch is in effect for Edisto Beach, South Carolina to Cape Fear, North Carolina. A tropical storm warning is also in effect for Jupiter Inlet, Florida to Surf City, North Carolina. A tropical storm watch is in effect for north of Surf City and Duck, North Carolina, and Pamilco and Albemarle Sounds.
Should also point out that there's a tiny little glitch on their latest forecast cone. There are no watches in Key West, even though there's a tiny little yellow marker there. No idea why.
The guy that was creating graphics had one job.
Oh look, there it is. It's been fixed. They fixed it.
Oh.
So there we have it. So there's the latest track forecast, the 3-day forecast. They expect it to be a tropical storm around the same intensity as current up until landfall, and they think it will be in South Carolina, and then into North Carolina, into the Delmarva Peninsula by the looks of things, New Jersey, on towards New England. Now, looking at the rain expectations, that still looks like it's going to be one of the biggest threats.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. We're looking at a wide swath now, a bit less than yesterday as we get up much more of the eastern seaboard, but still significant portions where 4 to 6 inches of rainfall are possible, and a very large area stretching from Florida all the way up to Maine, where 2 to 4 inches of rainfall are possible at this time. So, especially as the storm's moving quickly to the northeast, once we get towards days 2 to 3, a lot of that rainfall could occur in cells very quickly, and that raises the threat for potential flash flooding.
Now, closest to the action today in our group is Euxineta. How are conditions there? I know you're a little bit away from the storm, but any comments?
Conditions here?
Have you fallen down the stairs? What was that?
I think that may be a blooper reel now.
In Tampa,
Slightly.
conditions are pretty much normal right now. Like, it's just...
There's actually a little rain headed your way, though.
Yeah, there is, but I think this is a straight shower.
Yep.
I'm just gonna...
It doesn't
But
look
usually
anything too
close.
impressive, no. But what you will notice on the western side of the storm, this is from the Miami radar, is it? Oh no, we've moved up now to Melbourne. The radar showing that not much is really going on the west side, particularly southwest side of this storm. And is that still influence from wind shear there?
Could be.
I mean, strong vertical wind shear has still been a very significant detriment to the storm, and because it's not going to have a ton of time now, compared to some of the forecasts a couple days ago that had it over water for longer periods between its closest approach to Florida and potentially the Carolinas moving northeast, the National Hurricane Center now is not really expecting that wind shear to abate or lessen in anything more than a marginal way, and that's why they're not calling for any potential re-intensification of the system anymore, which is very fortunate. You know, ever since last night when we saw the first rebubble up of convection, shear's been pretty consistent in trying to shove things off to the north and east of the center of circulation. And even though it's a bit more symmetrical now than it was last night, it still isn't looking too great in that regard. Some of the effects are still pretty clear.
And I think it might just be starting another waning phase there, just the very beginning of one on this satellite imagery. But I tell you what, the models have been saying for a couple of days now, ever since it first lost its structure over Andros Island, they've really been calling for, the NAM in particular, I think might be on the money with this, because it's been calling for blow-ups of convection to just keep going all the way around the coast until it makes its final landfall. Well, its landfall in South Carolina or North Carolina, and then it will start to get more towards an extratropical looking cyclone eventually transitioning. But until then, it's not going to get any structure. It's just going to blow up randomly until it gets there.
And honestly, that's going to make, nailing down certain locations along the coastline up until a landfall spot a bit more difficult to say what exactly impacts could be for exact locations or more specific places, because that could end up being more dependent where you live if you're on the coastline from central Florida to South or North Carolina, based on if the storm has a random blow up in convection and thunderstorm activity right as it's passing you. So that's why it's really important with a system like this, when impacts could be a bit more random at times, to stay up to date with the latest information regarding the system.
Orlando looks like it's going to get quite a bit of rain today by the looks of things. A band passed through earlier, another one on the way. But generally along the coast of Florida, impacts would appear to be minimal, and I can't see them increasing anytime soon. Considering that if you're following the storm and where we think the storm center is, you draw that line once again, it's moving away from the coast from this point onwards.
Yeah, and I just want to note that
unless it changes its mind.
Yeah, basically. So, and I believe that, honestly, I think the biggest impacts from the storm will be up north.
It could be a big rain event.
Yeah, it's more possible that the main threat from the system to land, if the current trends continue, we don't see a jog to the west that tries to bring this onshore, unfortunately, although that's looking increasingly unlikely by the minute, would be some rainfall activity as we head up the eastern seaboard of the U.S. now. One of the tells that they're not expecting a significant impacts on shore is the rainfall graphic from the Weather Prediction Center. Yesterday, they were trying to nudge 6 to 10 inches of potential rainfall on shore in parts of Florida. The localized maximum that they're expecting now from Isaias in Florida in terms of rainfall totals is about 4 inches now. So they've really backed off on those forecasts quite a bit.
Here's a little graphic we can show you on the storm total rainfall. So you can see near the center of the storm you've got large rain amounts. Where's my indicator gone? There it is, up to 8 inches by the looks of things in that very dark area. So 8's around there, 2 inches on the northeast there. The southwest, there's hardly anything. It doesn't register, there's zero. But then you've got these areas of little swathes of rainfall that are delivering not even an inch so far. Just trying to spot any locations that are up to an inch. Yes, there is one land location that's up to an inch of rain accumulation so far. That's towards Titusville, I believe. Yep, just north of there. Little area of 1 inch. But that's the highest rain amount that we've had so far from this storm. At least in central Florida, anyway.
Yeah, and I want to point out that someone has mentioned that there was actually a marginal tornado for the Carolinas from the advance of Isaias tomorrow.
A marginal risk of tornadoes.
Yes.
So that's another one to look out for, and that can sometimes be the one that catches people out as well. You're expecting a hurricane, you get a tornado along with it sometimes, but you'd be very unlucky to be the person that's in the center of that.
Yeah, someone's asking a question. I think it's always good to go over some of the technicals occasionally. Someone's saying, why did the pressure go up with the system? And I think, Nathan, you can confirm this really, but the best explanation for that is, the storm weakened, and weakening tropical cyclones, whether it's due to dry air or wind shear or losing organizational structure, have the wind pressure go up in correlation with that.
Now, it wouldn't be a huge surprise to see the storm lower in pressure, but stay at the same intensity, or indeed stay at the same pressure but actually weaken in winds. That would happen if the storm is growing in size and if the ambient air pressure around it starts to lower, and that does happen as the storm moves further towards the poles. So eventually this pressure will fall even if the storm does weaken. But at the minute we're talking 995 millibars, which is around par for the course for moderate, maybe even a high-end tropical storm, depending on size. And size-wise, it's, well, fairly small now, you would say, wouldn't you?
I mean, definitely smaller than it was when it was a potential tropical cyclone and stretching from South America to north of the Caribbean.
Yeah,
so.
that heavy rainfall zone there to the northeast of the center, that stretch is probably about 100 miles.
Yeah, I just read it. Tropical storm force winds extend outward up to 115 miles from the center.
115 miles, so there we go.
Unfortunately, that's in the northeastern quadrant right now, which is going to be the side that's furthest away from land at the moment.
If you're past Jupiter, if you're south of Jupiter, Florida, this storm's over. It really is. Fort Pierce, just watch out. Maybe there'll be something that just comes randomly, but shouldn't be a big event there. Rainfall looks like it'll be higher further north around, as we looked at Cape Canaveral area, up towards Jacksonville maybe, as time goes on. But Daytona Beach, maybe Orlando will get a little more, an accumulation, maybe an inch or two. But for most of the Florida coastline, it's looking like this event is really starting to draw to a close. But you look more towards the Carolinas, and tropical storm warnings now in effect there, and a storm surge watch in effect. So that's the area that we'll be looking out for next, and they're of course no stranger to flooding. And are they, how is the water situation across the US East Coast right now?
In terms of temperatures?
In terms of drought, and is there a need for tropical cyclones, or could they do without?
Well, I can't really say for the portions of the southeast, but I know up here, at least locally, we've had a pretty normal summer in terms of rainfall, so it wouldn't be a detriment really to have a couple inches of rainfall up here in significant portions in the northeastern United States, but after that point you probably wouldn't want to see too much in a short period of time, otherwise you'd have some elevated flooding risks.
Yeah, actually is a couple areas that have abnormally dry conditions, such as the Georgia coast, South Carolina coast, and then in the Northeast, where you have some moderate to even a small severe drought in extreme northern Maine
Interesting.
from
Yeah.
Drought Monitor.
It's very interesting, and I guess that we should also talk a little bit about the other storms that are going on, like Hagupit and Sinlaku, maybe?
We'll get there in a moment, so let's take a look at the wide shot of the Atlantic. You've also got that other area of interest, is now been designated Invest 94L, that happened on air last night. That's just passing the Lesser Antilles, and you can see it moving northwest. Still has a little way to go, but National Hurricane Center are fairly confident. 60% chance in the next 5 days. I'm still not sure, personally. I'd have it about 40% at least. Elsewhere in the Atlantic, looking fairly quiet. And hopefully Isaias will pass by without any further worries, but I can't guarantee that by any means. Looking at the Gulf of Mexico, just in case you wanted to have a look, there's hardly anything going on. You can just about make out the storm there on the right hand side as well, on the Atlantic side. The Eastern Pacific is also very quiet, so that leaves the Western Pacific where the action is at the moment. What's left of Tropical Storm Sinlaku, apparently still a tropical storm at this point as it moves inland over Vietnam and now Laos, and enormous influence extending all the way over the South China Sea could actually lead to another tropical cyclone formation off Hong Kong and the Chinese coast. And next to it you can see hanging off the edge there on the right hand side is Tropical Storm Hagupit, which is approaching the very southern Japanese islands of Yaeyama and Miyako-jima, and is passing just to the east of the northern tip of Taiwan. This storm is intensifying quite significantly, up to at least 50 miles per hour. I'd say it's probably a little bit stronger, maybe even matching Isaias' intensity right now, and that's going to head in towards China in the next few days and could be a big rain threat for Shanghai and the region around there as well. So that's something to watch in the Western Pacific, and that storm will probably live at the same time as Isaias, to be honest. But that's the Western Pacific there.
Notably, with Hagupit too, the track shifted again slightly to the south in the near term, to the point where the JTWC is expecting a small area of gale force sustained winds across the extreme northern portions of Taiwan now. So people in that location as well need to monitor this very closely, see if continuous shifts happen, because they are expecting some conditions on the extreme northern parts of Taiwan.
Was there no storms in the West Pacific in July? Yes, there were no named storms in the Western Pacific in July. First time in 134 years.
And then 2 hours later, there's a named storm.
And then another. 2 storms, so...
And another one.
There you have it. But the Western Pacific's now up to 4 storms, still well below the average, which is about 9 or 10 by now, so... Lot of making up to do, and the Atlantic needs to chill a little bit, to be honest, because it's on storm number 9 and 10 depressions. Could be an 11th coming up, and usually we're at maybe 2 or 3 by now.
Did we like switch basins or something?
Literally have.
We literally did an Uno reverse.
So
I think we did.
You know, those who have been watching this closely from Florida and the southeastern area of Florida in particular now is passing, the storm has passed you. I guess you could say that that's a dress rehearsal for anything else that might happen this year, because we weren't really expecting any significant impacts this early in the season. It could really have happened though, but Isaias had other ideas when it decided it would completely capitulate over Andros Island. We're actually thankful of that. We don't say that with disdain, but the National Hurricane Center were at one point expecting a Category 2, and in the end, only a moderate Category 1, and only briefly at that intensity before weakening, and now down to a 65-mile-an-hour tropical storm. We don't think it has any extra tricks up its sleeve, but you can't completely rule out a hurricane landfall in the Carolinas, although at the moment we're expecting it to pretty much be exactly the same for the next 3 days.
Right. Yep. We're in a fortunate scenario where even though it's a bit further away from the Florida coastline than we were thinking prior, because it's going to end up moving a bit further north in latitude before it tries to turn to the northeast, it's really going to only have 12 hours where vertical wind shear could really lessen any significant amount before it makes a landfall, likely in South or North Carolina now. And because of that, the wind shear is still going to be relatively high. We're still looking in between 20 and 30 knots for most of its journey up the coastline until it moves inland. And that's really, fortunately, going to be a strong inhibitor to prevent this system from likely intensifying any further.
Just a minute, we're under attack here at HQ.
How?
Helicopter flyby, I'm not sure what was going on there. Anyway, back to the latest radar imagery. That was startling. Here it is once again. You can see the deeper shades of red. It's certainly got an impressive core there.
Oh yeah, no, like I even saw a little bit of pink on the Tampa Bay radar at one point.
Yeah, and you got a tiny little bit there as well from Melbourne.
Yeah, and it looks like because at my area right now there isn't really necessarily any like I could definitely see some of the outer bands actually hitting me because that's what it looks like right now is that like the outermost bands are like looking for hitting me, but other than that it's been pretty quiet.
I will say, if you pull up the satellite loop of the system, you can see, even though it has these kind of stronger bursts of convection, that over time they're still getting ripped off to the north and east of the center. So the impacts of shear are still pretty visible as Isaias continues to pass, more paralleling the Florida coastline now, at least.
And it is doing that, and paralleling would be the right word, but and hopefully moving away at this point. It certainly is at the moment, and you can see again on the satellite imagery the cloud tops, especially on the infrared, really blowing up. Some people suggesting it's an eye. I can assure you it isn't, because this quite often happens with the cloud tops when they blow up these extreme hot towers there near the center. You can have little gaps there as well. Uneven surface, you could say. It's a hole, but it's not an eye by any means.
And just to answer a quick question, a couple people are asking about reconnaissance aircraft in the chat right now. There are no ones currently in the system, but 2 have taken off recently. So we should get some new data points in within the next 2 hours, most likely, giving us the latest information directly about the exact intensity and pressure of the storm.
You can see over Florida right now in particular, you look over the eastern coast of Florida there, the red areas, which is where the higher cloud tops are, is already starting to recede. So this convection blow-up is itself starting to wane here. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here, because every time the convection gives up, the storm is at risk of completely losing it.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you can pull up the radar again real quick, because I think it is useful to show that in comparison to some of the infrared imagery, because even though there's colder cloud tops right on the shore, right now at least it isn't necessarily translating to very heavy rainfall levels coming on shore as well, at least consistently like you might see indicated by cloud tops. So that can be a bit misleading at times. You know, there's the radar imagery. Bands coming in north of the bulk of that colder cloud top area, actually, towards Orlando or Ormond Beach in Orlando right now.
Yep, let's just zoom in on that area as well for those who are in those regions, and you can see the rainfall pushing along there. Probably going to reach Euxeneda's house very shortly.
Yeah, actually, it's still a little ways away, but it will still hit probably.
But still, you're not looking at huge rain rates in this. The most potent cell is the one that just passed Titusville there, and that's delivered an inch of rain along the coast, so that's probably an inch an hour in that cell right now. But the other areas, you're probably looking at quarter, half an inch, and it's moving pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take some questions if we have any. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. We're here for the hour. It will light up for us if you send in any questions. Any new waves?
I mean, tropical waves?
Yes.
If that's the case, I mean, there's always a couple coming off of Africa right now. They're nice to see in the computer models every now and then. There's one actually emerging right now, but it's really going to disintegrate according to the computer models. Then another one could come out in about 2 to 3 days, but the same thing is projected with that one, with all the computer models as well. The main area to watch for potential development in the basin is going to be Invest 94L, which according to the National Hurricane Center does have a 60% chance of development in the next 5 days. I would say it's quite interesting, though, because they really upped the odds of development as some of the models began to back off on supporting it. The GFS is still much less supportive today and last evening than it was about 2 days ago. And the same goes for many of the other major global models, including the European.
Yeah.
Indeed. We've got plenty more questions here. New Brunswick has a tropical storm statement. Do you think more provinces would be affected?
Bit far out to say exactly, just because Canada still is around day 4 right now, although impacts related to the system can extend up into Canada. If you look at the cone, at day 3 to 4,
Could be
it's going to
day
be moving
3.
from Maine into Canada. So some impacts are possible with rainfall amounts potentially in that swath of 2 to 4 inches, although we can't really pin down an exact location, because when you get to day 4, it's still a bit unclear.
Yep. Ice resistance states that the wind shear is low in the main development region. I think we might
Even
just
if
leave
it
that as
is,
a comment.
dry air is very inhibitive for the time being in that
Well,
area still.
Well, looking back at the wide picture, actually you can see a lot of Saharan dust still traversing the Atlantic Ocean. Some very dry air there in the middle of it all.
And I would just assume that's most likely why those 2 waves coming off of Africa are not going to develop, is because of that dry air.
What name do you think the season will stop at in the Atlantic?
Ooh, that's a good question. Honestly, I'm gonna make a bold prediction right now. I think that it will stop at beta.
Beta.
Yeah. Although I will say, right now, that's just, saying the exact number it'll end at this point. We can give general forecasts like our season forecast at the end of May.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, the season forecast that we did do at the end of May, I think we're about 2 or 3, I think we're 3 storms ahead of that prediction. That ended with 21, so that would mean the Greek alphabet if it kept true to my forecast for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think we will possibly, I shouldn't say probably, reach the Greek alphabet. If not, I mean, at least maybe 2.
However, having looked at longer term models, there's no inclination that there will be anything significant around the world for at least a week after this phase of cyclones.
Which is, honestly, it would be a really nice break.
Oh, it'd be lovely. Like a monsoon rain after a very hot summer.
Someone's asking, is Florida still going to get tropical storm force winds today? And
Good
to answer
question.
that, we had a tweet out earlier showing some of the radar imagery showing the indication that tropical storm force winds were lapping at parts of the coastline. As the latest advisory, tropical storm force wind still extends 60 miles northwest of the center. So as long as this parallels the coast within 60 miles, you could see areas having tropical storm force winds try to lap onto the coastline just by a little bit. But it's going to be a close call for a lot of regions as we see some more sporadic impacts with these convective blowups that try to occur.
In fact, if you look at the National Hurricane Center's wind field, it barely touches, I mean, it technically touches the coastline, but I mean, since it's that far out, I mean, the only time you'd get sustained winds is if it's in a band or something.
Well, look at these radar velocities right now. And don't forget, the radar sight is panning outwards, so when it reaches the storm, it's actually in the air at least a couple thousand feet in this case. I'm not sure how far up, but it's getting maximums of 75 miles an hour roughly, or 82 there actually. Oh, that's quite far away. That means it's pretty high level. So that would probably translate to still about 65 miles an hour on the ground sustained.
Yeah, I think the National Hurricane Center keeping this at a 65 mile per hour storm is fair for the time being. And of course, like you said, that's pretty high up in the atmosphere that radar scan, and you gotta keep in mind the farther away a radar looks into a storm like this, the higher the readings are going to be because it's looking higher and higher in the atmosphere than opposed to say if it was looking maybe 10 miles away from the radar. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at radar like this for tropical cyclones especially.
And that's the voice of Isaac. Welcome aboard once again. And this is the third tropical cyclone to affect the US in just over a week, don't forget. And you were in one of them, Hannah. And now you're tracking this one. What are your thoughts waking up to it this morning?
Well, I just woke up, but I went and looked at the latest, and man, it's just so far the storm has been really a headache for the forecasters that have been tracking it, especially the National Hurricane Center.
Could you help us pin a center right now?
It's right between the radar gap between Miami and Tampa, but there are some terminal Doppler velocity radars that I'm not able to pull up on my screen right now, but I can tell you that the center looks like it's right about where. Let me just go ahead and pull it up on my my phone and see if I can spot it again. Looks like it's just off the coast of Point St. Lucie, just maybe southwest off the coast of Point St. Lucie by about maybe 40-50 miles or so.
That's about the numbers that we've got. About 50 miles.
And if it helps at all, as the 11 a.m. update, the National Hurricane Center is putting the center at 26.9 degrees north and 79.6 degrees west. That just gives any extra validity because it only would have moved a few miles since then, according to them, saying it's moving north-northwest at 8 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And Wyatt, we've not heard much from you so far. If you want to speak up a little more, what are your impressions of the storm today?
I mean, it is definitely, I can just about guarantee you, it's probably not going to become a hurricane again. It's going on a weakening trend at this point based on Recon's pressure data differences. So,
but then you've got, some models were saying a few days ago that it would weaken and then it could have that secondary peak as it's making landfall in the Carolinas. Do you think that might happen? It might make another run?
I think it might get close, honestly. There's only 2 models right now showing it getting to the hurricane force. And then the rest of them show it kind of like fluctuating and then weakening. And that is reflected in the NHC forecast.
Yeah, I think the fortunate thing in terms of intensity with this system is that even though the forecast is now a bit further east, so it's not really going to be as close to the Florida coastline as a lot of people were expecting last night, that
me included,
the general time frame it's going to have between its first turn to the northeast and actual land impacts with the Carolinas, where that time frame of shear may be lessening slightly as the direction of the storm tries to align better with upper level winds, will be generally quite minimal, and the National Hurricane Center is still expecting shear in between 20 and 30 knots over the system until it makes landfall in South or North Carolina. So fortunately, we're looking at a system that really is going to have to fight extremely hard if it were to want to try to intensify even the slightest bit at this point out, and it's currently forecast to not become a hurricane again.
Yeah, I also want to point out, 1 second. I also do want to point out it does appear that there is some moderate dry air on water vapor loop.
Oh dear.
Just to the north of it.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So
more struggles ahead, it seems.
Mm-hmm. So it could possibly even weaken further before it gets to North Carolina.
Well, that would be nice. The NHC forecast discussion mentions that the Doppler radar velocities are supported of 58 to 59 knots. Any thoughts?
That sounds about right, because I know, I think it was the Tampa radar, if I'm not mistaken. Not the Tampa radar, the one on Melbourne Beach, Florida. That one was saying that the velocities were indicative of up to, I think it was 80 or 90 miles per hour when I was checking on it. And of course, that's really high up in the atmosphere, so we got to take into account that and then reduce that, by however many thousands of miles it is away from the radar. So that rating seems about right to me in terms of off the radar.
Yeah. I do want to point out, though, I mean, that 70 to 80 mile an hour winds, that is flight level, and so it would take quite a bit for that to come down to the surface.
Probably more than flight level.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, what are those velocities are about 2 miles up, right? Just about.
How much
Yeah,
is
if you're
that in
going
feet?
off of
Well, it
the
depends on
radar.
Depends on if it's like a low tilt or a high tilt.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
We don't know that.
Based on the last
We're going
radar
off of-
passes, or not, sorry, Isaac. Based on the last recon pass, we're seeing maximum flight level winds around 60 knots, so that's more supportive of the
Yeah.
55 knot intensity.
So there we have it. Keep your questions coming in. We're here for another 25 minutes on this latest update of Tropical Storm Isaias. You can start your message with Force 13 like Bossman has. When will the Saharan dust leave?
Let me look.
How long's a piece of string? I mean, there isn't. It's not absolutely congested with the dust, the Atlantic Ocean, but you can see elements of it that dry air regions that will be an inhibitor to storms. But it's not absolutely clogged with dry air and Saharan dust.
Yeah,
not as much.
Saharan dust. Not as much.
I can hear myself.
I can hear myself.
Not as much as earlier in the season. I'm not sure why I could keep hearing myself, and I can right now as well, so I'm not sure what happened with that. Some kind of difficulty there. It wasn't me. Wind shear is lower near the Carolinas. Do we agree with that?
It generally should be, and I'm sure other people can talk more about that, just because as the storm starts to turn to the northeast, it's going to align better with the upper level winds, and that generally lowers shear, but it's going to have a very short time frame in doing so, and the amount of lower shear is only going to be quite marginal, so it's not really going to have too much time, considering its disheveled overall structure, to attempt to really take advantage of those.
We're also looking at some other radar from our US head of operations, Tim, and you can see the wider shot there as well. Anything that you want to point out on this particular radar?
He's
Strat?
muted it.
I know
muted
Tim
and
is. I was
deafened.
just asking. Sorry, I was asking everyone else if you had any impressions of this.
Actually.
Oh, Tim is
Nathan-
here. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Nathan. I was actually sitting silent so you guys would have this radar imagery, but I wasn't expected to be put on the spot there.
No, I wasn't. I was putting everyone else on the spot. It just didn't come out that
Wait a
way.
minute.
Anyway, you're here now, and we also want to
Yeah.
know about conditions in your area in North Carolina. Whether rain is good or bad for you right now.
Well, since I'm on the air here, the wider radar here we have, and I've kind of drawn a bit of a line, is the path that it's taken over the last 2 to 3 hours. It's not really evident that it's really getting any closer, but we are starting to see more of that north to northwestward curve, which is what the NHC has been calling for on their forecast, and the models have been hinting at it for about the last 2 to 3 days. As for drought conditions, overall, the southeastern part of the United States is actually in pretty good shape. There are a couple areas that are in D1 and D2 drought, so right along the Savannah coastline up towards South Carolina, where this could parallel, the rain will definitely be welcome for that area.
So the main question is really for me is where's the most vulnerable places for flooding right now?
Right now, with its current track, you're probably looking at places like the PD River, maybe the Cape Fear River, and the Lumbee River once you get further north of the South Carolina area, where right now the current NHC cone has a potential landfall. That's if it doesn't make a quicker curve to the east. But those three rivers, and then once you get further north of U.S. headquarters, the rivers further north there could see some significant flooding with the rainfall amounts, as that NHC graphic's been pointing out, anywhere between 4 to 6 inches.
A question, will it briefly become a hurricane again? Does anyone think it could?
I seriously doubt it.
I
doubt
I
it.
doubt it.
You can't rule it out though.
National
I'm
Hurricane
not.
the National Hurricane Center don't forecast it to intensify really at all till it makes landfall, perhaps in the Carolinas here. I mean, unless the shear decides to lessen substantially and the storm decides to take advantage of that, I don't see that happening at this point in time, which is, of course, good news for both Florida and the Carolinas there.
Yeah, if you just want to really emphasis on the general intensity guidance, the National Hurricane Center back a day and a half ago, when it was calling for 85-mile-an-hour peak, was actually above the model envelope. There's only one model above it, and that was bouncing around between tropical storm and Category 3 within 12-hour intervals. So you can really count it.
What
right
model
now,
was that?
they're more in the middle. It was the Coat 2 model.
Oh dear.
Yeah, you could definitely discount that one because of that. But right now, the only model that has it as a hurricane, again, is that same Coat 2 model, and it bounces it between a moderate Cat 1 and a weak tropical storm back to Cat 1 within a day. So you can't really count it either in this situation. So the general forecast at this point with the computer models and the National Hurricane Center is that wind shear, drier air, and some land interaction will inhibit this system from becoming a hurricane again, even if it's briefly over some more favorable conditions between its closest approach to Florida and a potential landfall in the Carolinas.
Now we've got some models on our screen here, and am I right to say that it's shifted east?
Intermediate or short term, yeah, it does look like it. There's a strong
Long-term.
consensus now with the North Carolina being a potential landfall spot instead of South Carolina on this set of runs, at least.
Versus the NHC cone, it does look like it
further
has
east.
moved further east. It is further east. The last NHC cone that I had saw last night had almost near certainty of a landfall near Myrtle Beach. The current model runs there that we're looking at now, that's more along the Wilmington, Pender County area. So definitely not great news if that actually verifies, since we know Wilmington got heavily impacted by Florence 2 years ago.
And of
Somebody
course,
in the chat is saying a model is predicting a storm in the 960s.
where?
Uh,
Out of this or what?
I don't know. That's just all they said. I didn't know if any of you knew that. It's kind of interesting. 960s.
I haven't seen any of that recently anywhere.
Oh, someone left.
So there we have it. So again, you can see the wide shot here. Still blowing up though is Tropical Storm Isaias right now. You can see it here once again. Those dark black to grey areas are the highest cloud tops that are still blowing up. Still a little bit towards the centre, but in general it looks like it's starting to wane, especially when you look over the Florida coast where the dark reds are getting lighter, and then it goes to the yellows and greens and blues, and then when it gets beyond purple there's not really any cloud cover by that point. So it still looks rather impressive at the minute, but maybe it's past that peak in terms of its current convective blow-up. And of course, it's already past its peak in intensity.
Yeah,
Somebody asks, could Isaias still move more west to make a very close approach to Florida, if not a landfall?
Well, look at it right now. I'm not seeing it. It would literally have to... Well...
Due west.
Its movement in the last... Since it left the Bahamas, say. Look around here, the track has been something like this. And now it's there. And now, was it going to go from here? It's most likely going to go that way. There is a possibility, but it would have to really shift. It would have to go right the way over here if it was going to make a close pass. I'm not seeing that happening. And what could even happen is that it goes even further towards the north, towards that way, which would then put more towards the Outer Banks into play if that happened. But as it is right now, it's moving towards the north, north-northwest that is. And as you look at the wider shot here, if I was to do some more doodling, if you were to follow the bend, something like that, moving north, and then eventually what looks like into North Carolina, and then onwards, might be, if those model consensus were about right, or maybe a more slight turn which would put it further into South Carolina and then beyond right over land and probably right over Tim's house.
And unfortunately,
It's going to be very close. Model guidance, once you got past 2 to 3 days, has had it shifting anywhere between near U.S. headquarters to within 55 miles. So even the slightest oscillation in its track could be really the defining difference between maybe 1 or 2 inches here at U.S. headquarters and potential flooding.
When do we expect the first major? There's a question.
Can't really say. But
I think there's a decent chance of it happening in August.
Yeah, I think it will happen in August somewhere.
At least in the long-term models right now, though, you could probably make a safer assumption that we wouldn't see anything for at least the next week and a half.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, there is gonna. I did look at that, and it does appear that a large Bermuda high is going to overtake much of the Atlantic.
And if we're wrong and we get a major hurricane next week and a half, we'll be here to talk about it and say we were wrong. I don't think so.
Yeah. I think also something to note in general about the impacts in southern Florida, fortunately being much less than some people were anticipating last night. It's just a couple of more almost joking tweets and images showing the damages around. I don't know if Isaac can pull up some of the screen share real quick. There's a couple of tweets just showing, at least in Miami, extremely minimal damage, and then in West Palm Beach, a couple trees and larger branches potentially knocking down some power lines. But fortunately, overall, really nothing major for southern Florida in association with this system.
And no river flooding?
No, not at all.
Okay, good.
No.
So here we are looking once again at the latest satellite imagery. Let's see if we can take some more questions. The NHC cone has it moving more west soon. How far west do you think it could end up going? It is still moving north-northwest, but I'm not really seeing it right now. I'm seeing it moving. I'm seeing it right now, but I'm not seeing it turning more west.
Yeah, I think this is about as far west it's going to get in terms of the how close it is to the Florida coastline.
All right, and how many hurricanes are we expecting in August? I mean, again, that could be anyone's guess. How many storms do we expect in August? Similar question there. A few, but we can't really put a number on it. I think in our pre-season prediction we're saying we're expecting that late August would be the peak of the season, a slightly earlier than usual peak. And I think, was it something like 6 storms in August I think we had down? I can't even remember. This was the end of May prediction. Let me just double check that one. Yeah, we were expecting 6 storms in August, so that would take us from I to J, K, L, M, N, O. And then maybe another 4 in September and another 4 in October.
I mean, fortunately right now, at least in storm activity, we talked about it briefly last night, but some of the climatological factors, including Kelvin waves, might be more suppressed for significant portions of the basin for much of the first half of the month. So we could really, fortunately, get to see a lull in activity a bit after this invest that comes through 94L that might try to develop into a potential weaker tropical cyclone near Bermuda in a few days. But other than that, we could see a bit of a break, fortunately, for the basin.
Isaac, what are we looking at now?
This is a live camera off of Jupiter Inlet in Florida, on the Florida coastline here.
So it's pretty much the closest land area to the storm, then.
Not really much to see at this point. This is a pan-in camera, so it moves around like every minute or so to another location, like it is right now. Earlier, I saw one person on the beach, I guess, just trying to sightsee or something like that. But other than that, it's fairly quiet in terms of activity on this camera, which is good, of course, to see. And I think
that's someone down there, isn't there?
Yeah, that might be.
I'm back.
I can't tell, but I think we have Devin Williams on our stream by joining us on the phone, I believe. Devin, are you here?
Yes, I am.
So, you've been witnessing this storm as well, and you've commented on how terrible many storms have looked in the past, Devon. Does this meet that criteria?
You know, this honestly, I mean, what is this, a 65-mile-an-hour tropical storm now?
65,
Pretty sure.
yeah.
65? Yeah, that's what I thought. Honestly, for a 65-mile-an-hour tropical storm, it doesn't look that bad.
Well, there we go. If Devon's saying it, then that's a big problem. Now, models have been suggesting, Devon, that, I think I'm on board with it, some models, saying that at this point, you're not really going to see any eye organization. It's going to be blow-up after blow-up of deep convection.
Yeah, that's pretty much what you're going to see from this point, because the storm's pretty much going to end up having a lot of shear to deal with, especially with the trough that's coming to pick it up now. Usually once a storm ends up getting picked up by a trough, it ends up getting knocked up with shear coming from the jet stream. And once that ends up happening, usually any sort of intensification from the system pretty much done. It's very good that Isaias ended up weakening at this point. Definitely a good thing that we're not getting a hurricane landfall in Florida. Thank you, Andros Island, for that. We appreciate your sacrifice. But obviously we're still having 65-mile-an-hour tropical storm. There's still going to be some storm surge. I believe still we're expecting 4 to 6 inches of rain over Florida and the Carolinas. I believe I'm in the 3-day cone now as well, which is really interesting because the cone's really shifted far west, if I recall correctly.
It has, but we were just discussing that not long ago and how the model consensus at 12Z is further east significantly than the NHC, so who do you believe?
Okay. Well, I'll stick with the NHC cone for now. If the NHC cone ends up going further east, then cool. If it ends up sticking to the west, hey, I get to experience my second tropical storm this month.
I know, yes. Crazy times.
That hasn't happened since 2011, so
let's see if there's any more comments. Send them in. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. We're only here for the hour, so we've only got another 9 minutes or so. Looks like it's having a slight shift west in the latest frames. Is anyone seeing that?
Take a look.
It is hard to tell because we can bet, even on radar we can't really see the center because it's being blown away. So.
That's a little radar gap.
Yeah, it depends on the radar you're using. I'm on the Melbourne one, and it's looking more north-northwest.
North-northwest.
There is two interesting things that I'm noticing off of this radar, and I would actually like Devin's opinion on this. Seeing a lot of lightning in around the center, and something that I normally have not seen with my coverage of tropical cyclones, but hail inside the core. What are your thoughts on that, Devin?
Yeah, so that's actually typically a sign of weakening. Whenever you end up seeing lightning and especially hail associated with a tropical storm, that means that it's releasing a lot more energy than it's taking in. So typically, that's a sign of weakening. So if anything, that's really a good sign. Obviously, if we're getting hail and lightning over land, please take cover. Don't be running around in that stuff, please. Ice pellets to the face hurts, and lightning, I would imagine 50,000 volts doesn't feel great either. So just please make sure to, if you're in one of those convective cells, just make sure to take appropriate cover, even though the winds aren't necessarily extreme with this system.
That's very true. And we're looking at some of those bands that are moving through Florida right now. I don't think any of those fit that category right now, do they?
No, I would highly doubt that.
So that's good for now.
There is always the threat for tornadoes, too. I mean, I don't know if there's any tornado watches out or not. I didn't check that at all.
No, all I've seen so far was last night when we had that marine warning for waterspouts.
Yeah, that's going to happen.
Nothing active right now.
About right.
Let's see if we've got more questions then. Some interesting questions. Go ahead.
somebody asks that says they live on the east coast of Florida and they're asking they should no longer expect tropical storm winds. I just want to say, unless you live like right on the beach, as of right now, it's not looking too likely that you could see much in the way of 40-mile-an-hour winds or greater. Maybe some occasional gusts with those squalls that come through, but nothing more than that, really, I don't think.
Looking like.
Even though squalls can be a threat, even though this is offshore, and this is something I don't think we have really covered in depth, is that yes, this is a tropical storm. Yes, it's 65 miles per hour. Yes, the winds are not being impacted on shore, but that does not rule out the chances that there could be some occasional rip currents along the beaches. So if you do plan on going down there sightseeing, stay out of the water. You do not want to get washed away, and this sadly does happen with tropical cyclones in this part of the world.
Yeah.
We've got some rather strange questions. First of all, what are the chances of a December storm? Don't get ahead of yourself. I would say moderate, though. Will it hit the peninsula of Virginia?
I mean, the latest forecast cone tries to, if you look at the lines, if you draw a line between them, which is an option on the National Hurricane Center's website, brings it very close to actually bringing the center over. But you got to remember, as the storm moves north, it's going to get larger in size, and the main threat at that point will be rainfall levels. So just because the exact center won't exactly pass over the peninsula in the latest forecast, it could get very close, though, and of course any track shifts could actually bring it over. Don't discount the threat of a system because the exact center isn't forecast to go straight over you. That peninsula's in the cone of uncertainty, right smack in the middle of it, really, and they could see significant rainfall totals.
Here's another very odd question. Would tropical systems do better if the ocean was fresh water?
I don't know if there's any scientific correlation or studies done verifying that. But Nathan, there was a good question I saw earlier. Someone saying that they live near the Cape Fear River and what they could anticipate for flooding and damages. Since I live right here in the city of Fayetteville, and the Cape Fear River goes right through the city, it really depends where you're at. If you're south of Fayetteville, going down towards, say, Elizabethtown, down towards the Wilmington area, it really depends on the width of the river. I know up here during Matthew and Florence, we got 14 inches of rain, and the river gauges went from 8 feet to almost 60 feet. I don't think we're going to get anything near that magnitude, but 4 to 6 inches of rain, at least for the Fayetteville area, you could expect the river rises to be maybe 15, 18, maybe 20 feet, might approach the lower end of the flood stage. Once you get down towards the Lushock Lock, which is between Fayetteville and Elizabethtown, you might see some minor flood stage there. And down towards Elizabethtown, you can see some minor to moderate flood stage there, because I know the flood stage there starts at 23 feet. Past there, you start getting down to Wilmington, you might see it go 6-7 feet, which that's enough to flood some of the walkways around the battleship USS North Carolina. So that kind of gives you a bit of a perspective. South of Fayetteville, north of Fayetteville, I'm not too familiar with the river gauges there, but I know there are other tributaries that
and
run
there was, playing into that, there was another question for Raleigh as well.
Raleigh, you're probably much going to be in the same boat. You're probably looking 4 to 6 inches, at least by the current NHC standard. But then again, as myself have said on U.S. Streams and as Strat has said, definitely keep an eye on your local National Weather Service office. That would be the Raleigh National Weather Service office there. Keep an eye on the National Hurricane Center. And keep an eye on us on 413 West and 413, because you know we're going to be covering this.
Yes, plenty other questions there. Do we think the Western Pacific will make a comeback this month until October? Yeah, I do. I do think so. That's pretty much all we've got time for here. So, Strat, over to you to explain what our features are with these live events, because it's even confusing me at this point.
Well, as you know, we have these live commentary segments, which thank you everyone for coming out to watch this right now. We really appreciate it, of course. But we're also running 24/7 live automated feeds with satellite imagery and updated information and graphics on another stream, which is the top link in the description below. And after this stream ends, it defaults to the main live link, which is also youtube.com/413/live. So if you want to check that out when we go off the air, it's the top link in the description. It'll be the pinned comment in the chat in a moment as well. And also we have our video updates on the main channel, coverage on the regional channels as well. So we have a whole network providing coverage on this system.
So what if we were doing 10 streams at a time? Which one would the live link be on?
I think, based on what I've seen, that the live link would default to the most recent live event. That's why when we have these live commentary segments, if you type in youtube.com/force13/live, it defaults to this.
Got it.
But when this goes off the air, the automated stream will retake that link after a couple minutes.
So there we go. That's how it all works. We'll probably be back with more updates. Don't know. Well, I think we'll still have another live event tonight. We'll see. If not, we'll have videos on the Force 13 YouTube channel. Of course, we've also got our social media outlets. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. Search Force 13 all in text. And you can send us an email or chat to our community on Discord. discord.gg/Force13. That's all for now. We'll be back again later. Have a good day. And hopefully, the storm moves out of Florida pretty quickly without any effects.